I've closed over 4 million in high ticket sales using this exact pitch we're about to walk through, and I've also taught this to dozens more closers who've used it to stack 20, 30k months. So stick with me and you will get results like this. Closing pay in fulls with literally zero objections. You'll have days of making over 3k, even 4k in one day. You'll have days where you close 100% of your calls. So we're going to get deep, boys. Let's lock in. This one is going to make you a lot of money. Point of monumental importance is that the difference between an average closer making say 5, 10k a month and an elite closer who's making 20, 30k a month and upwards. The difference is that the average closer can read a script and say words, but the elite closer knows why he is saying those words. So just before we get into the framework and scripts, I want to first off walk you through the fundamental principles, the key psychological principles that go into the pitch. Very, very important if you want to make the money that you want to make. So there's 3 key objectives to the pitch, and we're going to go into each of these in a little bit more detail. Number 1 is to build the bridge. Number 2 is to get the prospect to trust your system/process. And number 3 is to get the prospect to raise their certainty that they will get the desired change. So fundamental principle number 1 is called bridging the gap. Now, any of you guys that have watched my previous content, or maybe you're a coaching client, you will know how much I love a good diagram, and this is one that I often give out. So in this diagram, on the left-hand side, we've got our stick man, which is in his current painful state. On the right-hand side, we've got our stick man in his happy, desired state. We've got sharks in the water, which represent potential obstacles to get to the other island. In other words, to get to their happy, desired state, their goal. And the bridge represents how they will get from where they are now to where they want to be, which is your process, the process that you're selling. Now, our job in the pitch is to build the bridge in the prospect's mind of how they will get to the other side, how they will get to their goal, their happy, desired state. Very, very important. Fundamental principle number 2 is that the prospect has to trust our system/process, and that's what we're going to do in the pitch. So again, any of you guys that work closely with me, or maybe you've watched my previous content, you will know that there are 4 crucial ingredients to close a high ticket deal for somebody to be a buyer. Number 1, the raw foundational ingredient is that they have to have a desire to change, which is what we largely build up in discovery. They also have to have a desire to change now, which again is largely built up in our discovery. Thirdly, they have to trust our system/process, and that is what we tick off in the pitch. Lastly, they have to have the money to sign up. Now, like I said, in the discovery, we increase the prospect's desire to change and desire to change now. By the way, I'm going to be making a lot more videos specifically on discovery, so subscribe to the channel if you want to hear that. And in the pitch, this is where we're going to knock off that third one, where they're going to trust our system/process. Now, remember, guys, like I've said in previous videos, the desire for change is the raw foundational ingredient behind everything, okay? No desire for change equals no sale. Remember, the prospect is not buying a course, they're not buying an agency service. You could say, yes, they're buying the goal, the outcome that they want, but if we oversimplify it, what is that? Buying a goal, that's buying change. The change is the raw foundational ingredient. I know I harp on about this, but it's just that it's so key. It has to become ingrained in your mind that what you are selling is change. Now, with that in mind, we have to get the prospect to trust that our system will get them the change that they want. Because if we don't have that, remember, the prospect is buying change. So if they don't believe that your specific process will get them the change that they want, then no sale, okay? Very, very important. And that's what we're going to do in the pitch. We're going to get them to trust that our process will get them the change that they want, okay? Now, fundamental principle number 3 is what I call energetic transfer/non-verbal communication. Again, the guys that I coach will know how much I always reiterate that 90% plus of how human beings will interpret your communication is non-verbally. That's studied scientific fact. So to simplify it, in other words, you could say it's not what you say, but how you say it. The actual words that you say make up about 10% of how somebody actually interprets your words. Now, in my program, 6-Figure Remote, I go extremely deep into training my guys on how to deliver optimal non-verbal communication. I teach that, by the way, through both my educational resources and by, live coaching with me. But to sum up, if I had to sum up here, because I can make a whole 2-hour videos on this topic alone, non-verbal communication. But if I had to sum up, during the pitch, we want to convey in our non-verbal communication both certainty and enthusiasm. The reason why is that prospects, generally speaking, do not buy in a low energy, lethargic state. They buy when they are in a happy, positive, hopeful, high energy, and enthusiastic state. So now knowing this, what becomes very, very important to know is how do we actually ensure that they are in that state? By being in that state ourselves, because energetic transfer is absolutely real. And what energetic transfer in a simplified way means is that whatever state you are in, so for example, high energy or low energy, if you're lethargic or enthusiastic, that state, that energetic state, it will transfer to the prospect. That's a fact. It will rub off on them. So therefore, in our pitch, it's absolutely essential that we ourselves are in an energetic state of both certainty and enthusiasm. Very, very important, guys, those three fundamental principles. Go back and rewatch that a couple of times if you need. So with that being said, let's dive into the actual specific process, okay? Now, this is first off the macro framework. I'm going to walk you through it at a high level, and then we're going to go into detail on kind of each different phase. Now, the pitch itself has 5 micro phases. Micro phase number 1 is where we're going to recap the prospect's problem, their pain, their goal. In other words, the change that they want. Micro phase number 2, we're going to explain the 3 to 5 steps that you are going to do to get them to the goal, which is your process. You could call this 3 to 5 steps. Some people call it 3 to 5 pillars. Doesn't matter, but it has to be numerically laid out. I'll go into that in more detail in just a second. Microphase number 3, we are going to display some social proof. Again, I'm going to walk you through why that is so important. In microphase 4, we're going to answer any questions that they have. And in microphase number 5, so important, we're going to give what's called a temperature check. Now, let's go deeper one by one. Microphase number 5, microphase number 1, we're going to recap the prospect's problem, pain, and goal. Now, in this fairly short phase, all we're going to do is make about a 2 to 3 line statement where we're going to recap the prospect's problem, pain, and goal. Now, why do we do this? We do this so that we can essentially tee up and line up what we're about to do next, where we're going to explain the 3 to 5 step process that's going to get them out of that pain and problem and get them to their goal, their happy, inspired state. So we want to always keep their problem, pain, and goal at the top of mind. Remember that diagram where we're bridging the gap? We kind of want to always, we're going to be saying a lot of words to the prospect. So we just want to keep at the surface of their conscious mind what we're actually here for. We're here to get them the change that they want, okay? So so that's when we recap that statement, again, we're just bringing it to the top of mind again and kind of lining it up nicely. Okay, so here's some example scripting. So for you specifically, Name, here's the game plan. You know how you mentioned you're struggling with X problem, X problem, X problem, and how that's impacting Y pain, Y pain? Well, what we're going to do is take you through a very simple 3-step process that's going to build out specific context. So insert context, guys. It's going to take you from where you're at now at that current situation with X stated problem all the way through to you having desired outcome with absolute certainty. Okay, that's the scripting, guys. Again, every offer's different, so I have to, generalize it with current situation, but just insert the right things into the words and the asterisks there. Now, a key point, guys, the overall structure of the pitch is going to be the same across businesses. Of course, the exact wording of the pitch will be dependent on the business, okay? I say join a coaching call. This is a document for my program, so don't worry about that. Now, once we've made that statement, again, it's a very short phase. It's a couple of line statement. We're then going to roll into microphase number 2, which is the bulk of the pitch, where we're going to explain the 3 to 5 steps that you are going to do to get them to the goal, to get them to the change that they want. This is where we're going to explain the process. Now, key point number 1 here is that you want to start off every pillar by saying, pillar number 1 is about X, Y, Z. Or you could say step number 1 is all about X, Y, Z. So you know how you mentioned stated problem and it's causing stated pain? Well, what we're going to do is X, Y, Z, and you roll into what you do essentially. I'll walk through more of an example script in just a second. Now, key point number 2, very, very key. We are going to do what's called looping back. So at the end of every step, every pillar, you're going to do looping back. And looping back is where we relate everything we've just said about the step and the pillar back to their goal. Now, remember what I said earlier, guys, that we're saying a lot of words to the prospect. We're giving off a lot of logical information. But remember, the prospect is there for the change. And you can also remember, the classic phase that people buy out of emotion, then justify with logic. And we're going to be throwing a lot of logical information their way. So after each step, what you want to do, you've been through that logical information, then we're going to do looping back. And what's that is going to do is relate the logical information that we've just said. We're going to take that to the emotional part of their brain, okay? We've got the logical information. We're then going to make our looping back statement, and it's going to bring the change that they want, the goal that they want, back to the surface of their conscious mind, and also move them from that logical information into an emotional state. Very, very important, okay? So for example, let's say that I've been through my first step, my first pillar, you know, blah, 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 blah. And what that ultimately means is it's going to make it so much easier to get to a desired outcome, and so much quicker, by the way. So, you know, simple stuff, guys. You know, it's a 1 to 2 line statement. Just relate everything you've said back to their goal, okay? Now, key point number 3 is ask if they have any questions at the end of every pillar, every step, after you've made the looping back statement. So essentially, in this micro phase, the formula is you explain the step, okay? You explain the step, then you loop back, then you ask if they have any questions. And then what we do after questions, after we ask if they have any questions, we say, very, very important, we say, do you feel like that would help? Okay? So I'm just going to very quickly recap that. We explain the step, we make our looping back statement, we ask if they have any questions, and then we say, do you feel like that would help? Very, very important. Again, we are consistently throughout our pitch bringing to the surface of their conscious mind what we're actually here for, which is the change that they want, the goal that they want. And if you can get a verbal commitment at each step, that the prospect saying, yes, I feel that would help, it's going to astronomically increase your chances of a sale, okay? Now, back to the questions point though. Like I said, after we've made our looping back statement, we're going to ask them if they've got any questions. Now, why do we do this? It's because there's 2 main reasons, but the main reason is that confused prospects do not buy. We want our prospects to clearly understand the process, okay? Remember, our entire goal of the pitch is to get them to trust that our process will get them the outcome that they want, get them the goal that they want, the change that they want. And here's the point of monumental importance, guys. A prospect can only trust your process if they understand it. So when we ask if they've got any questions at the end of each step, we essentially just clear up any confusion, and we help them further understand our process. As a little bit of a side note, what this also does is, you know, rather than me just speaking at them for 5-10 minutes, if I can keep it interactive, what you also do is you kind of, at every step, you get a kind of feel for how engaged they are, how interested they are, okay? Now, if when you ask this, if they seem, you know, it's more of like a feeling thing, but you'll feel it, guys. Like, you'll know the prospect by this point. You'll know kind of how they communicate. If they seem very unenthusiastic, okay, you've got to read that they might not be liking something, and you can address it. If they seem very, very excited, you know, positive tonality, they're asking you, you know, very curiously, well, how does this and this work? Then you've got to read that they are interested and they are liking it, okay? Very, very important. And guys, just a very last point on asking questions at the end of every step is that what you don't want to do is you don't want to save all the questions until the very end of the pitch, because the prospect's not going to remember all their questions. A prospect is going to naturally have questions throughout the whole pitch. How does this work? But how does this work? And if you don't do this, if you don't ask them if they've got questions throughout the pitch, what will happen is you'll get to the end of the pitch, ask them if they have any questions, and they just won't remember it. Like, they won't remember the questions that they had, and they'll just feel confused. They won't necessarily be able to consciously articulate it, but again, they will just feel confused and they won't buy. Very, very important. So, very quick recap. So, you go through the step, you then make your looping back statement, you ask if they have any questions, and then you say, do you feel like that would help? That's the formula for how it goes, okay? So here's like the whole thing together. And pillar number 1, Mr. Prospect, is about XYZ. So you know how you mentioned stated problem and it's causing stated pain? Well, what we're going to do is XYZ. Specifics, specifics, specifics. And then what that ultimately means is that you can get to desired outcomes so much easier and frankly just so much quicker. So any questions about that first step at all? No. Okay, do you feel like that would help? Yes, okay. Now, another point of very monumental importance, guys. During our pitch, remember I said that we have to use it numerically. So, for example, 3 steps, 3 pillars, 3-step process, 3-pillar process. We do that for a very specific reason. And it's because human beings find things easier to mentally process and understand when it's in a numerical, structured way. So, for example, think about this. Why is it that you'll see so many YouTube videos with titles such as, you know, the top 5 ways to get rich, or this one secret can change everything, the 2 reasons your business is stuck? Or, for example, you'll see like a blog post with like, you know, the top 5 best places to visit this year, the top 2 reasons you should use X products, okay? Often the best performing most viral pieces of content have numerical based values in the title. Why? Because again, humans find it much easier to absorb and process information when it's laid out in a clear numbers based structure. Okay, very, very important. And the same goes for our pitch. Remember, our goal is to get the prospect to trust our process, trust that our process will get them the change that they want. So with this in mind, the prospect has to be able to clearly understand your process, because remember, confused prospects do not buy. We really want our prospects to fully and clearly understand our process. And that's why we present our solution, our process, as a numbered structure. So for example, a 3-step process, a 3-pillar process, a 5-step process, etc. Very, very important. Now, again, like I mentioned earlier, guys, exact wording will be business dependent, okay? So I'm going to walk you through the exact pitch, so the exact script that I use for an offer that I used to close on, so that you can get a feel for it. Obviously, these are not going to be the exact words that you use, but, you can insert the blanks, basically. Okay, Mr. Prospect, so pillar number 1 is all about your offer and appointment booking. So you know how you mentioned that you're sending hundreds of emails per day, you're getting 0 responses, it's causing the business to be stagnant. Well, what we're going to do is help you craft an absolutely no-brainer offer and a sales argument for your services that are going to perfectly resonate with your potential clients, the ones that you want to reach out to, the ones that are perfect for you to work with. They're going to have essentially no choice but to simply just book an appointment with you. What's then going to happen is your offer is going to be audited by us. We'll assess it. We'll make any tweaks necessary. You'll be positioned differently to all the other agencies out there. And what this is going to do is ultimately just make it so much easier to book appointments and get to that initial 20K a month goal with so much more ease, okay? From here, we're going to completely, and I mean completely, transform and systemize your appointment booking. We're going to hand you 15 different systems, and XYZ and XYZ, so that within the first 4 weeks, you will have a steady flow of 5, 10 appointments a day, all completely hands-off once it's set up, and we'll be on track to hit that 20K a month goal, okay? Does that all make sense? Any questions at all? No questions. Okay. Most importantly, do you feel like that would help? Okay. Very, very important. So I didn't go through the whole thing, guys. I don't want to bore you with all of it, but hopefully that's just giving you guys a good idea of flow. Okay. So that's micro phase 2, where we explain the actual steps and the pillars. Now, micro phase number 3, like I said, that phase we've just been through, that's the main bulk of your pitch. And in micro phase number 3, we're going to display some social proof. So just to very quickly recap, by this point in the pitch, we've made our 2 to 3 line intro statement about their problem, pain, and goal. We've walked them through the, X step process, making sure that in every pillar, we've related what we've just said back to their problems, pain, and goal. We've made sure that at the end of every pillar, we've looped back to their desired outcome. And we've also made sure that throughout, after the end of each step and pillar, we're asking if they've got any questions and then asking if they feel like it would help. By this point, guys, your prospects should be oozing with certainty and excitement, okay? Certainty and excitement that your process is going to get them the change that they want. And at the end of this stage, at this stage, what we're going to do is kind of put that final nail in the coffin by sprinkling in a little bit of social proof, okay? So remember, actually, I haven't walked you guys through this on my YouTube channel, but the guys that I'm working with will know that I walk them through the primary ways that human beings evaluate a new decision and a new idea. And there's 3 ways that when any human being is presented with a new idea, there are 3 primary filters that the brain uses to decide whether or not it will accept that new idea. I'm not going to go through all of them right now because it gets quite deep, but one of the filters that our brain uses to decide whether we will accept a new idea is by what other people think of the idea. Very, very important. So in other words, you can call this social proof, what other people think of the idea. And social proof is one of the most powerful tools that we can use in our pitch, and it's one of the most powerful tools that we can use for human persuasion. Why does every single advert out there, display some kind of social proof? You see on like your Facebook ads, people say, they spend a lot of time in social proof, right? Showing other clients, happy clients that have got results. And it's because it's a very, very powerful driver of human decision making, okay? Now, social proof in our particular context of high ticket sales typically includes, screenshots of customers getting good results, screenshots of customers, just saying positive things about us and our company, positive reviews. And what we're going to do is we're just going to sprinkle them in after that micro phase 2, after we've explained the 3 to 5 step process. So it's going to go something a little bit like this. Again, for your particular offer, you'll just need to fill in the blanks. Okay, Mr. Prospect, so that's the three-step process, and that's how I know that we can definitely help you get to desired outcome. We've done this for, I believe, X amount of different students and clients. Here's a couple of recent results, by the way. We've had screenshot, 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 okay? So a couple of key points on this phase, guys. When you're sharing screenshots of positive customer results, reviews, etc., if you can, try and add in like a very brief kind of 2-3 line story about the person, and ideally about how it relates to their specific situation, okay? So for example, the prospect's problem and what they're here on the call for is that they don't have enough leads, and you're selling some kind of solution which is helping them get more leads. Okay, so we've been through microphase 2, explained the steps, okay, blah, blah, blah. Okay, yeah, and we've got Sean here. I remember my call with Sean, actually, like, great guy. I think, at the time, he was really struggling with lead flow. Just like you, he tried XYZ to fix it. He actually ended up joining us, and after this exact same call that we're on right now, 4 weeks later, he had X implemented, and only 2 weeks after that, he got X result. So if you can, try and, rather than just showing the prospect social proof, try and tailor it to them. Try and just add in a brief little story that kind of relates to them. Again, so if their specific problem is leads, try and show a screenshot where a customer that you've had solved their lead problem. And again, just sprinkle in a little bit of a story. Now, key point number 2 is that each company you begin working for should have a link or a folder to their social proof. If you really want to be an A player, if they don't have that, go and create one for the company, guys. Like, again, this is something I drill into my guys in, sounds weird, drill into my guys, forget that. This is something that I reiterate to my guys that I work with. Like, be an A player. Like, if there's something that maybe you come into a company and you feel like something is missing. So, for example, they don't have like a structured spreadsheet which, has links to all the different social proof. Go and create one. Like, become an A player, guys. It's gonna make you a lot of money. It's gonna make you perceived in the company's mind as somebody of more value. That's gonna get you the things that you want, whether that's better commission structures, maybe some kind of base salary, promotions. Like, become an A player, guys. Anyways, that's a whole topic for another time. Now, key point number 3 is that while social proof is very important, try not to overdo it, okay? Because the reason why is that some prospects will know what you're doing. And if you overdo it, it can actually cause them to lose trust. Especially, like, I closed for a long time on Charlie Morgan's offer where, we are selling to some beginners, but there's also a lot of established, coaches, agency owners, course sellers. And, like, these people are very sophisticated. And when you show social proof, they know what you're doing. So, yeah, just especially if you have more of like a sophisticated prospect, try not to overdo this because, again, it could cause them to lower trust. So, but you do still want to sprinkle it in, even with sophisticated prospects. But you just got to try and finesse it. Try and make it be perceived that it's kind of off the cuff and not planned. So, like when I'm going through it, I'm actually deliberately, in both this stage and throughout, guys, like I wouldn't recommend this to beginners, but I'm actually deliberately trying to sometimes like almost like stumble over my words, like say I'm trying to make it seem less scripted. Again, don't worry about this if you are a beginner. Like, do not do this. Just fucking, stick to a script and just try and remove filler words and all that. But when you get to a certain level, you actually want to go the opposite way and you want to almost make yourself seem more human because you will just know the words what to say off the back of your hand. And you do want to humanize yourself. You want to make yourself seem a bit normal. So there's stages in, like, for example, social proof or even other aspects of the call where I'm deliberately, making out like I'm thinking about what to say next, or maybe saying, I'm deliberately doing that, okay? So again, guys, ideally sprinkle it in as if it's off the cuff, as if it's not planned. And then once we've displayed our social proof, we're going to move on to the next stage, microphase number 3, where we're going to answer questions. I'm not going to spend long here because it's self-explanatory, right? You're going to ask the prospect if they've got any further questions, okay? So in this microphase, nice and simple, we're going to tell the prospect you finished your presentation. We're going to ask them if they've got any further questions. So the exact scripting goes something like, okay, well, perfect, Mr. Prospect. That's essentially us. That's, as you can see, the product is designed to get you out of painful current situation by solving specific problem so that you can get to the desired outcome and give you that, and then insert deeper wide benefit of the outcome. Now, before I move on, what further questions do you have? Or is there anything specific you want me to dive into at all? Because I want to make sure that I have absolute clarity. Or sorry, let me rephrase that. I want to make sure that you have absolute clarity on this, okay? Nice and simple. If they've got any questions, answer them. It's self-explanatory. Any company or offer that you work on, they will guide you on, they'll give you a little bit of training on the product and help you to answer any commonly asked questions. If they don't have any more questions, then just simply move on to the next stage. Now, as a side note here, guys, some prospects will just genuinely not have any questions because, again, throughout the whole pitch, we've been asking if they've got any questions, so they just might not have any. But a really key point here, guys, is that you do want to kind of just listen out and be mindful of their tonality and hear the difference between like an excited, certain, no questions, or like a bored, no questions. Like somebody who's quite like blunt, straight to the point, seems disengaged. Okay, and the next phase is going to help you further clarify like where the prospect is at in their mind. Very, very key final stage of the pitch here, guys, the temperature check. So now in this final phase, like I said, this is absolutely crucial. So what is a temperature check? A temperature check is a way for us to gauge where the prospect is at. Like, do they trust our process? Do they trust me? Are they excited? Are they certain? Or are they hesitant? Are they unsure about something? Is there an objection that they're not saying? Very, very important. Now, along those lines, the reason why we do a temperature check is to uncover any hidden objections before we drop the price. Very, very important, because if the prospect has any hesitations or objections before you drop the price, then I promise you guys, any hesitations, any objections that they have are only going to be amplified after you drop the price, okay? So let's say that they've got maybe a slight hesitation and you don't address it. If you then tell them that your product is, 5K, 10K, a big purchase to them, that little hesitation is going to become bigger. It's going to become amplified. So we really just want to get those hesitations out the way before we drop the price. Very, very important. So we're going to get an idea of where they're at and address any objections before we drop the price and go for the close. So very nice and simple. All you're going to do is ask, by this point, you've asked if they've got any questions. You've been through any questions they've got. And you're going to say, got it. From our conversation today, I know that we can definitely help. And the main reason that we actually do these calls and don't just have like a buy now button online is to make sure that we've got a solid understanding about yourself, where you're at currently, where you want to be, if we can even help you. Again, from our conversation, I know that we can definitely help. But, really the most important thing for us is to make sure that you feel solid on the process. You feel like we can get you to XK per month. So just to be 100% clear here, on a scale of, let's say, 1 to 10, 1 being, I just don't think this is going to help, 10 being, this is exactly what I need, where do you feel like you fit exactly? Now, guys, a very crucial key point here. If they say a 9 or above with confident tonality, just move on. It's fine. If they say an 8 or below, say, okay, got it, and appreciate your transparency. Guys, there's something I should have added to the document there. It is on one of my other documents, but what I should have added, if they say a 9 or above with confident tonality, ask them why. Okay, what makes you so confident? Why is it that you're so confident? If they say let's carry on, but yeah, if they say a 9 or above with confident tonality, don't just move on. First off, ask them why they're so confident, okay? If they say an 8 or below, say, right, got it. I appreciate your transparency, by the way. So just curious, like what exactly do you think is stopping you from being more like a 9 or a 10? And then you're going to handle the objections and concerns that they've got. They'll tell you why, and you're going to handle it before we drop the price. Because remember, any hesitations, any objections or concerns that they've got are going to be amplified after we drop the price. So if they give you something like, well, it's just that X, Y, Z, address it right there and then. Address it before you drop the price. Very, very important. So guys, to re-clarify here, if it's a 9 or above with solid, certain tonality, ask them why they feel so confident, and then move on. If they give you an 8 or below, or here's a key point, or if they give you a 9 but with like weak, uncertain tonality, you don't believe them, then we're going to call them out basically using the script above, okay, where we're going to say, okay, just curious, what do you think is stopping you from XYZ? Or if they give you a 9, they're like, yeah, I guess a 9. Like, you see that upward tonality? I don't believe them. So we're going to call them out. We're going to go like, really? You can just do this in a playful way, by the way. Just playfully say, really? That doesn't seem too confident, man. What's going on? Just playfully call them out, okay? But yeah, 8 or below, use that scripting above. Now, in summary, guys, our entire objective of the pitch is to, number one, get the prospect to trust and believe that your process will get them the change that they want. Very, very important. Remember, the 4 key ingredients for somebody to be a buyer. The third one is that they have to trust your system/process. Very, very important. The raw foundational ingredient of a high ticket sale is change. They are buying change. So if they don't believe that your process will get them the change that they want, then a sale just cannot be made. Now, secondly, the second objective of the pitch is to build the bridge in the prospect's mind of how your process is going to get them from where they are now to where they want to be. Now, we also covered how the pitch has 5 micro phases. Micro phase number 1 is where we're going to recap the prospect's problem, pain, and goal. Micro phase 2 is where we're going to explain the 3 to 5 steps that you're going to do to get them to their goal. Again, very, very important that this is numerical based. So 3 steps or 4 pillars, because human beings process information better when it's laid out in a numerical way. Micro phase 3, we're going to sprinkle in some social proof. We're not going to overdo it. We're just going to sprinkle it in though. Micro phase 4, we're going to answer any questions that they've got. Micro phase number 5, we are going to do a temperature check, which is very, very important to gauge where the prospect is at, uncover any hidden objections, and address those objections before we drop the price. Lastly, we also covered how nonverbal communication is so important, how energetic transfer is very, very real, and how whatever state you're in will transfer over to the prospect, and therefore we ourselves, as the closers, we must maintain high energy, enthusiasm, and certainty all throughout the pitch. Okay, guys? I'm going to link the document in the description. There's also a link in the description if you do want to talk about, working with me closer, some one-to-one coaching, I've got, of course I've got such a biased opinion, but I genuinely think it's the best high-ticket sales training and recruiting program on the planet for high-ticket sales. Again, biased opinion, of course. But, guys, it's been an absolute pleasure. If you've made it this far in the video, congratulations. Go and implement this. Go and make a lot of money, and let me know your progress.